These meetings aren't for people like you. Go back to your lane, boomed his wealthy white neighbor, leaning back smugly in his designer suit as the entire hall turned to look. Those words struck deeper than anyone in that room could imagine, meant to brand the hardworking widowed father as an outsider, meant to erase his worth with a sentence. The crowd chuckled, some nervously, others with cruel smirks, while the man's greasy work uniform and steel lunchbox became targets for whispers. Yet he sat silently, hand brushing against the old envelope hidden inside that very lunchbox, the document no one else knew about. He didn't lash out. He didn't lower his head. His steady eyes held quiet strength. They thought he was nothing, the narrator teased, but one letter inside that lunchbox was about to change everything. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and if you believe in giving bullies exactly what they deserve, hit subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens next. The murmurs in the hall grew louder, like bees stirred from a hive. The wealthy neighbor leaned further back in his cushioned chair, his voice dripping with venom that carried across the rows of folding tables. Of course he's here to complain, he barked, pointing a manicured finger at the black father. It's always the same with people like him. Never solutions, only problems, always asking for special treatment while dragging down property values for the rest of us. The room buzzed with cheap laughter and nervous sounds of agreement. Some residents shuffled their papers, others nodded simply to avoid being the next target. A few whispered, "He shouldn't even speak at these meetings." The father inhaled slowly, holding his composure. He stood, his steel lunchbox still clutched in one hand. "I came here," he said evenly, "for one reason only: the playground. Near the south end is falling apart. The swings creak. The slides are rusted. My kids and everyone else's kids deserve a safe place. That's what I wanted to ask for. Something that benefits all of us." Before his words could settle, the neighbor laughed, a sharp bark of mockery. "Playgrounds? Maybe when you start paying proper dues. Men like you want everything for free. Tell me, do you even contribute enough taxes to cover the mulch under those swings?" The father's jaw tightened, but he did not raise his voice. "I've worked in this town for over a decade. I pay my share like anyone else." The neighbor sneered, his smug grin widening as he rose slowly from his chair. "Wrong. There's a difference between renting in my neighborhood and owning it. Men like you rent. Men like me build and own. Don't confuse your place." The words hung in the air like a guillotine, slicing away whatever fragile respect the father tried to hold on to. Around them, residents murmured louder. A woman chuckled under her breath. A teenager in the back pulled out his phone and began recording, whispering, "This is gold. Wait till it's online." The father's shoulders squared. He could have shouted, could have reminded everyone about the extra shifts he worked to feed his children, about the nights he stayed awake fixing broken machines so factories could run, about how much he sacrificed since his wife died. But he didn't. He closed his eyes briefly, recentering his calm. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly. "That's all I wanted to share." More laughter ricocheted through the hall. The neighbor smirked like he had claimed another victory, waving dismissively toward the door. The black father picked up his lunchbox, clutched it carefully against his chest, and walked out. As he exited, the whisper of chuckles followed him, joined by the muffled click of camera phones capturing his silence. People laughed not because they hated him personally, but because complicity felt safer than courage. In that moment, the villain looked untouchable, and the father looked like nothing more than an outsider humiliated again. They thought that was the end of his story. But one hidden letter inside that lunchbox was only the beginning. The insults from that night didn't stay trapped in the walls of the community hall. They spread like wildfire across the neighborhood. Within days, small cruelties sprouted everywhere. His children came home from school in tears when classmates mocked them with cruel chants, repeating their father was just a renter who doesn't belong. Walking to collect the mail, he found the box pried open, stuffed with notes scrawled in red marker. Go back where you came from. At the grocery store, clerks who once nodded politely now served him with rolling eyes, mimicking the exact condescending tone of the wealthy neighbor. Even casual neighbors avoided eye contact, gossiping in clusters at driveways. He'll never own property here. He's just lowering the standard of the community. It became a chorus of exclusion, spreading whispers, cold shoulders, and sneers. But through it all, the black father never lashed out. His shoulders remained steady, his voice calm, his focus on working long shifts and bringing dinner home for his kids. Viewers could feel the weight of his silence, each microaggression digging deeper, each petty cruelty compounding the humiliation. He became a man living every day in the shadow of his neighbor's poison, the community complicit in echoing it. The tipping point came at the Homeowners Association picnic, the one event meant to celebrate family unity. As he arrived quietly with his children, holding a casserole dish his late wife had once perfected, he felt eyes burn into him before a single word was spoken. The racist neighbor spotted him instantly, his laugh booming across the park loud enough for every ear. What is he doing here? He's never going to be part of this neighborhood family. A hush descended, and then nervous laughter, and finally open agreement. Parents pulled their children away, organizers shuffled awkwardly, and whispers buzzed until one committee member approached, shame written all over her face but voice firm. I'm sorry, sir, but this event is only for homeowners. You'll have to leave. The casserole dish jostled slightly in his hands as his kids looked up at him, confused and hurt. He said nothing, only tightened his grip on the steel lunchbox tucked under one arm. His thumb traced the edge of the sealed envelope inside, the faint outline pressing back against his finger as if reminding him, not yet, but soon. He turned calmly, ushering his children away with dignity intact, as behind him neighbors chuckled, confident that their judgment was final. The audience, however, could feel it now, the foreshadowing spark of power lying hidden inside that envelope, waiting to ignite. A few days later, the community park filled with laughter and chatter as families gathered. But as usual, the black father and his children stayed slightly apart, the weight of judgment still lingering around them. He sat quietly on a bench, fixing a broken toy car for his son, while his daughter swung gently on the squeaky swing. That's when an older woman, a long-time resident known for saying little, stopped in her tracks. She studied him for a moment, the calm way he instructed his kids, the quiet dignity in his posture despite the sidelong glances from others. With a faint smile, she leaned closer and murmured softly, "You remind me of someone." Her words hung in the air, mysterious and cryptic. But before he could ask, she simply nodded and walked away. The moment unsettled neighbors nearby who quickly sneered to regain control of the narrative. One mocked loudly so the crowd could hear. Patience doesn't buy a house. Calm won't pay taxes. He'll always be nothing here. Nervo. Us chuckles followed, but the woman's remark left a subtle ripple of unease beneath their mockery. Soon after, his daughter tugged at his sleeve innocently, eyes wide as she noticed the tall houses glittering with lawn ornaments. "Daddy," she asked in a soft voice, "why don't we have a big house like the others?" The father paused, heart tightening, then placed a steady hand on her shoulder. One day, he reassured warmly, home won't be about what they think. It'll be about the love within its walls. His words carried quiet power, but the villains scoffed instantly, calling it fake confidence and laughing louder. As the ridicule spread again, the father's hand instinctively brushed the lunchbox beside him. His thumb pressed against the sealed envelope tucked carefully inside, and he lowered his voice into a whisper only he could hear. Soon they'll see. His calm eyes lifted back toward the sneering neighbors, but he remained silent, letting their arrogance blind them further. For the viewers, however, this was the first spark, the unmistakable hint that something extraordinary, something world-shaking for this neighborhood, was waiting within that simple envelope. The next homeowners association meeting was more crowded than usual, the air charged with whispers and anticipation. The black father entered quietly, his steel lunchbox still under his arm like always, but the room had already been primed against him. At the front, his wealthy white neighbor stood with a smug smile, thick paperwork spread across the table. He rapped his knuckles on the wood with theatrical flair. "Tonight," he announced loudly, "I have a proposal. Zoning changes that will ensure our neighborhood maintains its standards." His eyes cut deliberately toward the father, because frankly, there are people here who don't belong, people dragging us down. These changes will make it crystal clear who has the right to stay. Murmurs turned into claps from his allies, the crowd treating the speech more like theater than business. Then, as if he hadn't humiliated enough, the neighbor's voice rang sharper, directed squarely at the father. "You'll never own a single brick in this neighborhood. Men like you rent, men like us build. Know your place." Every syllable hit like a hammer, amplified by laughter from the crowd. Some clapped, others whistled mockingly, like spectators at a circus watching their favorite clown. The father stayed seated, his lips pressed together, hands folded calmly over the steel box. But the cut was deep. His children looked on in the back row, their small faces heavy with confusion and shame. Around them, people smirked cruelly as though their humiliation was free entertainment. When one committee member shifted a pitcher of water, it spilled across the table and trickled onto the floor, splashing against the father's lunchbox. A teenager in the row behind kicked the box deliberately, and it slipped open with a metallic clang. Inside, the familiar sandwich wrapped in wax paper tumbled out. Laughter erupted. "Cheap food, just like him," one kid jeered, while another pointed. "Even his lunch is lower class." And then, from the shuffle, an envelope slid free and landed by the chair leg. For a split second, it gleamed under the fluorescent lights, edges crisp and threatening with untold power. Gasps came not from recognition, but from curiosity. Yet before anyone could glimpse inside, the father quickly scooped it up, sliding it back deep into the box with quiet dignity. The crowd, oblivious to its weight, only laughed harder. His neighbor leaned forward one last time, savoring the cruelty. "Look at him clutching his little box like it's treasure. Let me tell you folks, the only thing in there is leftovers, because leftovers are all men like him will ever have." The hall roared, gleeful in its complicity, happy to see one man cornered and hid beneath arrogance. The father lowered his eyes, clasped the box even tighter, and let the noise wash over him like a storm. He did not answer, but the audience could feel it now, rage boiling, frustration peaking, as society cheered for the villain while the hero seemed hopelessly defeated. They thought humiliation was the end of his story, but that envelope would soon rewrite every line of theirs. For a long moment, the laughter smothered the hall like thick smoke. Then slowly, the Black Father rose to his feet. His hands tightened around the steel lunchbox before he set it carefully on the table. His voice was calm, almost too calm, cutting through the noise like a knife through glass. "I wasn't planning on showing this publicly," he began, eyes sweeping across faces that had mocked him endlessly. "But since everyone here wants to talk about ownership..." He reached into the box, fingers brushing against the wax paper, then pulling free the sealed envelope. For the first time, the crowd faltered, their smirks softening into squints of confusion. The neighbor chuckled, forcing bravado. "What could you possibly have in there? Another cheap sandwich?" he sneered. The father's jaw tightened, but his tone never rose. He tore open the envelope and withdrew a folded, embossed document stamped with a notary seal. He laid it flat on the committee table for all to see. Gasps rippled as the words heavy with legal power stared back at them. "At his death," the father said steadily, "Mr. Green, the man who founded this very community and an old friend of my parents, willed these properties into my care. That's right, the houses at Briar Lane, the commercial plaza, all of it." The hall fell silent, jaws dropping wide. Then the doors creaked open, and a lawyer in a dark suit walked briskly inside. He adjusted his spectacles, then held up an identical copy of the same document. His voice rang as official as a gavel. "This is hereby confirmed. Mr. Hero's full name is now the sole legal owner of these properties under Green's will, authenticated and binding." Shock detonated across the room like a thunderclap. Neighbors gasped, some covered their mouths. The arrogant man who had mocked and jeered so confidently turned pale, sweat beading at his temples as the crowd's eyes swung toward him. Phones that had been filming quietly erupted with comments and live-stream text exploding. "Unbelievable. This changes everything." The real owner in the room. For the first time, the sneers vanished from the faces surrounding him, replaced by disbelief, guilt, and dawning shame. The very man they pushed aside now stood revealed as the one holding power beyond anything they'd imagined. The lawyer's words still echoed when all eyes turned back toward the once smug neighbor. His mask of arrogance cracked completely, his face chalk white. The father, calm and composed, simply stood with the inheritance letter in his hand. A voice from the crowd rang sharp like justice itself. "You judged a man who now owns what you stand on." Phones lifted higher, recording every second as whispers hissed through the hall. "He mocked the owner, unbelievable, disgusting." The neighbor squirmed, gripping his chair as if it could anchor him, but his credibility was already gone. Applause erupted around the room, echoing like thunder, building louder until some even stood to honor the father they had dismissed minutes ago. A few crossed the aisle, offering sincere apologies, heads lowered with shame. The tide had turned. The crowd's loyalty shifted in an instant. The neighbor sat alone, humiliated, utterly isolated. True worth is never measured by flashy wealth or loud arrogance, but by resilience, dignity, and quiet strength. Never judge by appearances, because real power reveals itself when the moment is right. Share this story if you believe respect must be earned, not mocked. Don't forget to subscribe for more justice stories.